आज मेरे लाइफ का सबसे बड़ा सपना पूरा हुआ और मैं टॉप ऑफ द वर्ल्ड पे हूँ और बहुत खुश हूँ और सबको ये मोटिवेशन देना चाहती हूँ कि हर आदमी अगर अपने लक्ष्य को बनाए तो वो कभी नहीं हार माने और वो अपने लक्ष्य को जरूर पाएगा।
We can climb mountains, but aren't given financial independence. We can be Olympic champions, but there are barriers to independently board trains. We can clear UPSC exams, yet are denied jobs in civil services. We can bring laurels to the nation, yet face indignities at public spaces. We can set up companies, but they won't let us vote freely. We contribute to the economy, but they deny us education. But now we can change that because the power of change is in our hands. The RPWD Act is a result of a long struggle to get equal rights and opportunities for persons with disabilities in India. The Act was in consideration for over 6 years. In December 2016, the bill was all set to be passed in the Parliament. But a week went by with disruptions and adjournments.
House adjourned up to 12.
Tired with the delays, the activists took to the streets, social media, phones and email to MPs.
हम अपना अधिकार मांगते नहीं किसी से भीख मांगते हम अपना अधिकार चाहते नहीं किसी से भीख चाहते हम अपना अधिकार मांगते नहीं किसी से भीख मांगते हमारा बिल पास करो हमारा बिल।
Finally, on 16th of December, the historic bill was passed. Before the year ended, it was notified by the government and the RPWD Bill 2016 was enacted and became a law. Javed Abidi, Honorary Director, NCPEDP.
I've been saying this for a very long time that this new law, the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act, is a game changer. Now, why is it a game changer? Education, 5% quota increased from 3%, includes all new disabilities, including blood disorders. As far as the employment is concerned, goes up from 3% to 4%, includes many other disabilities. We have to ensure that it gets implemented. I think the biggest change would occur under accessibility, where it says that all new constructions or all new, so not just the built environment but digital transportation have to be accessible. The biggest, I would say, the underlying principle that governs the new law is the principle of no discrimination, and compounded with the concept of district courts. The law categorically says that every high court will designate a sessions court in every district of India as a disability court or a court which will take up disability cases.
The historic Rights for Persons with Disabilities Act is our strongest weapon. But the weapon is good enough only when we know how to use it. It is essential we understand the letter and the spirit of the law. Ramachari, founder, Diversity and Equal Opportunity Center.
The spirit of this law comes from the principles of convention, which is the first part of the act, and there are 8 principles: right to inherent dignity, freedom to make one's own choices, full and effective participation, non-discrimination, equality of opportunity, accessibility, equality between men and women, respect for human diversity, and rights of children with disabilities. So the way one has to read the act is to read the principles as well as the specific clause for the particular right.
The RPWD Act ensures us equality in all aspects of life, starting from education, participation in our democracy, finances, jobs, and even marriage. The Act arms us to fight discrimination in every which way. Ramachari, founder, Diversity and Equal Opportunity Center.
And the way that discrimination has been defined in the Act, it says a person denial of reasonable accommodation would also be considered as discrimination. Reasonable accommodation is basically the adjustment or the support one needs to access a certain right.
There are 21 disability categories mentioned in the Act. Persons with disabilities have been classified into 3 categories. 1. Persons with disability are those with long-term impairments, whose participation in the society is hindered by certain barriers. 2. Persons with benchmark disability refers to those with specified disability certified by an appropriate authority. 3. Persons with high support needs are those with benchmark disabilities with intensive support needs. This is the first time that people with specific learning disability are also covered under the Act. Geet Oberoi, founding president, Orchids.
अगर आपका बच्चे को SLD है, स्पेसिफिक लर्निंग डिसेबिलिटीज है, तो कोई भी स्कूल उसको बाहर नहीं निकाल सकता है, क्योंकि ये अब बच्चे का अधिकार है कि बच्चे को एजुकेशन 12वीं तक स्कूल के अंदर ही मिले. द स्कूल हैज़ टू बी इक्विप्ड, द स्कूल हैज़ टू गिव द टीचर्स अ टीचर ट्रेनिंग प्रोग्राम, द स्कूल हैज़ टू हैव स्पेशल एजुकेटर्स टू लुक इनटू द नीड्स ऑफ द चाइल्ड. तो बच्चे को कोई निकाल नहीं सकता है. CBSE और NCERT ने चाइल्ड फ्रेंडली किताबें या रिसोर्स बनाना शुरू किया है. CBSE ने प्रोविजंस दी हैं कि एग्ज़ाम टाइम में कैसे हेल्प हो सकती है बच्चे की. डिफरेंट प्रोविजंस लाइक 1 लैंग्वेज फार्मूला, गिविंग अ राइटर और अ स्क्राइब एंड गिविंग एक्स्ट्रा टाइम जैसे अलग अलग प्रोविजंस हैं जो SLD बच्चों को अब मिल सकते हैं.
For the disability sector, one of the key aspects to an equitable society is access. This Act ensures us freedom of movement. Meenu Bhambani, Vice President, CSR, emphasis.
I think the principle of accessibility and accessibility not just to the built environment but an all-inclusive broad range of things, that is services, technology, ICT, transportation, support services, everything that gets included in accessibility has been covered under the Act. Any public place which is used by public at large has been brought under the ambit of accessibility. Key feature of accessibility under the Act is that it also gives you a timeline and you have to comply with it, that timeline. And for new buildings, there is no excuse. You have to comply. So there is
Information is yet another domain that persons with disabilities must have access to. The RPWD Act ensures information and communication technology is completely barrier-free. Dr. Nirmita Narsimhan, Director of Center for Internet and Society.
The new RPWD Act now says that all information services have to be made accessible within 2 years, both by the public as well as the private organizations. Which means that now we have the power to demand people to make their websites accessible, to make their technologies accessible, and to demand that we have access to all the information which other people have.
For years, persons with speech and hearing impairments have had a silent existence even under law. This invisible disability has now been given a fair share of thought and space in the Act. A.S. Narayanan, General Secretary, National Association of the Deaf.
The India, our nation, we were independent in 1947. So let's talk about the PWD Act in 1995, which was our first disability act. But sadly to say, there was not much benefit for deaf people. Why? There were only 2 things about aid and about free education. Now all India, the disabled community, the deaf community has really suffered so many years. Now with the RPWD passing in 2016, there are many benefits. Let me tell you first, most important for the deaf people is communicated, and that's linked with sign language, which has been mentioned. Secondly, education. It's very important that teachers Deaf teachers are included in the teaching faculty so that they learn, and sign language, of course, then students. And the third and most important, all through any electronic media, all the communication must have subtitles and sign language widgets as well. So that is fair information for us. That's a huge benefit.
With the Rights for Persons with Disabilities Act 2016, we now have a voice loud enough to be heard in the corridors of power. We have a strategy to bring fairness and equality. We have the resolve to call out injustice when it happens. We can no more be overlooked when it comes to social schemes. Shruti Mahapatra, General Secretary, Swabhiman.
RPWD Act 2016 is a clear reflection of the socialist policies of India and also protects the rights and independent living with dignity of all persons with disabilities. In its social security schemes, it clearly states 25% of the quantum of assistance as compared to all other peoples will be available to those who have a disability. Whether it is a community center for sanitation or for counseling or for living in times of safety. It looks at center for orphan children with disabilities or those who have been abandoned. It also looks at new healthcare facilities and all kinds of support to be provided to all persons with disabilities.
For years, the private sector has shrugged its responsibility or answerability vis-a-vis persons with disability. But with the RPWD Act, no more. Ankit Rajiv Jindal, co-founder, Diversity and Equal Opportunity Center.
One of the most powerful features of the RPD Act is in its definition of the word establishment. It includes private sector very categorically. So unlike the PWD Act of 1995, where there was a lot of ambiguity whether it applies to the private sector or not, the Act is very clear. And some of the most salient features of the Act, whether it's the principle of non-discrimination, providing reasonable accommodation, having accessible transportation, or accessible information, that all applies to the private sector.
The Act hopes to break all physical, social, and attitudinal barriers against persons with disabilities. But justice is a key factor in ensuring that. Smita Sadasivan, Disability Legislation Unit, Vidyasagar.
Section 13 of Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 provides for the right to legal capacity to persons with disabilities on an equal basis with others, which is the right to be recognized as a person before law on an equal basis with others. We have the right to sign any contract, file a case, or to be a witness to a case, inherit your own property, or manage any finances or access any financial credits, etc. And section 15 talks about the government being mandated to provide support services, support measures for persons with disabilities to execute their legal capacity.
The marginalized, even within the disability sector, women and children have been given a special mention and attention. Disanu Nakro, disability rights activist, Nagaland.
Government and the local authorities have been entrusted with the responsibility of making sure that women and children with disabilities enjoy all their rights as equal citizens. With respect to children, the Act clearly states that all government and private schools must admit children with disabilities without any discrimination. The campuses and all the facilities must also be made accessible. The Act demands that children with disabilities are identified at an early stage, and this can be done through a survey carried out once in every 5 years.
Arman Ali, Executive Director, Shishu Saroti.
Rights of persons with disability to have recreation in sports on equal basis with others. The government shall make provisions for artists with disability and for sports, make all the facilities for sports and culture accessible for them, include new courses, training programs. The Government of India has to ensure that all the sports facilities at all the levels, from a district level to the center, are accessible for people with disabilities.
It was a dream that has turned into a reality. It has taken enormous efforts to get us our basic human rights. We are powerless no more because the power of change is in our hands.
No favors.
No patronizing.
No carrots.
No buy-offs.
No bribe.
No lip service.
No largesse. No obligations.
No enticements, please.
No favors.
No sops.
No aunts, no pacifying.
No tokenism.
No pitying.
No payoff.
You have a very, very rock solid law. Now it's in our hands how to use it. The power of change is in our hands.